You found the Backup Wrap-Up, your go-to podcast for all things backup, recovery, and cyber recovery. In this episode, we're talking about something that might make you a little uncomfortable, the idea that disk backups, for all their benefits, actually created a massive security problem that we're still dealing with today. I remember when we moved from tape to disk, and it was amazing, but disk backup security wasn't actually part of the original design. Those backups sitting in /backups, a threat actor can access them and delete them with one command. Prasanna and I explained why this happened and, most importantly, what you can do about it today. By the way, if you don't know who I am, I'm W. Curtis Preston, aka Mr. Backup, and I've been passionate about backup and recovery ever since I had to tell my boss that there were no backups of that production database that we just lost. I don't want that to happen to you, and that's why I do this. On this podcast, we turn unappreciated backup admins into cyber recovery heroes. This is the Backup Wrap-Up. Hi folks, wanted to mention my new book, Learning Ransomware Response and Recovery, which is now available for pre-order at Amazon.com. I wrote it with my co-author, Dr. Mike Saylor, who's a blue team cyber defense expert. He really knows his stuff. There are dozens of books to tell you how not to get ransomware. Our book starts with the assumption you're probably going to get ransomware. So we tell you how to respond to it and how to recover from it. It's unlike anything else out there. We tell you what you need to do now to be able to respond when it happens. We covered defenses to reduce the blast radius, how to protect your backup system, incident response procedures, negotiation strategies, backup recovery techniques, and how to prevent it from happening again. The tech reviewers gave it overwhelmingly positive feedback, so I think it's going to be a big seller. Pre-order it now. Search for Learning Ransomware Response and Recovery, or just look for my name, W. Curtis Preston. Hope you like it. Welcome to the Backup Wrap-Up. I'm your host, W. Curtis Preston, a.k.a. Mr. Backup, and I have with me Prasanna. I don't need no tape. Malayandi. How's it going, Prasanna?
I'm good. I don't think it's I don't need no tape. I think it is what's tape, Malayandi?
Yeah, yeah.
You're talking about a VHS tape, right? Or a cassette tape?
Yeah. Linear tape open, my friend. Digital data storage. Exabyte 8200. By the way, Exabyte, best named company in the history of naming companies, and it's not anymore. I wonder what happens.
Did they ever get up to Exabyte?
Not that company. Exabyte.
Someone must have bought that name.
Well, surely. But
well, surely, good sir. I know what you mean.
So Exabyte, it's interesting. Yeah, so some company, a premium domain exclusively for sale on the Brand Bucket Network. Guess how much it is?
$150,000.
$212,000. And I just made it $300 based on my comment. Yeah, so Exabyte was a tape drive manufacturer back in the day. And it was the first tape drives, well, technically the second tape drive that I cut my teeth on. I also worked on quick drives, which were QIC, which were not quick. They were actually quite slow. But Grandpa's talking about tape again. But you know what? The reason why we're having this conversation, and this isn't like a we should all go back to tape episode, but I think it's one of those. I think we should at least acknowledge. We can acknowledge the good that disk has done, and it has done more good than harm, but it definitely, at least in one area, has done harm. So let me just hang on.
But
what?
I'm
I'm gonna go back. We'll get to the
No.
the
Yeah,
button in a
I know.
minute.
We'll
What?
get to the but. No, continue.
Oh, okay. So I think that for the modern audience, Grandpa does need to explain tape a little bit. Okay, because tape was not perfect. There's a reason that the world went to disk as a primary backup and recovery target, right? But it also had a lot of good about it, right? And also it was not as bad as people thought it was, et cetera, right? And by the way, more tape is sold today than ever before, so that is a fact. But let's just go back to back before disk-based backups were a thing. By the way, at one point everybody did backups with tape, right? Mm-hmm. And then at some point there was a company who tried to address the challenges that we had with tape by putting disk in front of the tape.
Okay, before
system.
you get to that, let's talk about what the challenges are first.
Well, hang
because
on.
I don't think
I'm just going to say this. I'll finish this. Who was that company? And we said they were crazy.
IBM?
Yeah, IBM. Yeah. Okay. Anyway. All right. So basically a tape drive, you have a tape, right? And you have a tape drive that lays the data down magnetically on the tape.
On like
right?
a strip, right? And it's like a physical strip that moves.
So you have two different kinds of tapes. You have cassettes and you have cartridges. So a cassette, for those of us that remember cassette tapes, right? So a cassette tape, technically, a lot of people are like, oh, well, you mean like cassette tapes, like I had in my cassette tape player.
Like audio
so
cassettes.
A cassette tape literally means a tape with two spools,
mm-hmm.
right? But most modern tape drives are what we call cartridge tapes, which means that they just have one spool, okay? And the way a cassette tape works is the tape stays entirely inside the box. I'm making that's the biggest cassette tape. Yeah. Actually, VCR. VCR would be a cassette tape, right? Yep. The tape stays entirely inside the box, and it just goes from one spool to the other spool. A cartridge tape, like LTO, is a single spool, and the tape is pulled entirely out of the cartridge and spooled onto another device for use, and then it's pulled back into the cartridge, right? There are also two ways of writing the data on the tape, because one thing that is important to understand about tape, and this will come to resurface, and that is that in order to get a good signal-to-noise ratio, which you need a good signal-to-noise ratio in order to reliably write the data to tape, right, to a magnetic media. The tape head has to be going very quickly across the medium, right, the tape, right? Mm-hmm. And there are two ways that we make that happen. With a cassette tape system like the Exabyte 8200, AIT, which is probably the most modern system.
Tape system.
That was a cassette system. It's a helical recording. There's a drum that's slanted, and it spins, and the tape is pulled slowly across that slanted head, and it writes slanted stripes across the tape.
So it's like tape. At an angle.
Yeah, at an angle, yeah. And the tape is actually going pretty slow, and it's the head that's spinning that's going very fast. The industry pretty much gave up on that design for whatever reason, and they went with the linear type tape where you have a stationary head, and then it goes. The tape is pulled very quickly across that head in order to get that high signal to noise ratio, right? But unfortunately, that came with a side effect that the tape was not great at going slow, right? How
do you define fast and slow? Because I think people probably don't have a notion of relative speeds of these.
Yeah, great question. So in terms of megabytes per second, right? Like a modern LTO 10, which just started shipping, wants a gigabyte a second, right?
Wow.
Yeah. and back when I was dealing with things, like it was like we were talking like 15 megabytes a second, 30 megabytes per second. The numbers just, the problem is, in order to get the tapes bigger, you put the bits closer together on tape. And as the bits got closer together on tape, the tape got faster. Right? And so, but the problem is, as the tapes got faster and faster, the ability to give data to the tape was what didn't get faster. And so
you need like a giant fire hose to feed it, basically.
Yeah, and you couldn't do it. You needed a fire hose, and what you got was a bathroom
garden
faucet
spigot.
Right? Yeah, exactly. Right. So you had this fundamental mismatch between the ability of the tape drive needing to go fast. It couldn't go slow. Again, it had to go fast because of the signal-to-noise ratio. And so it couldn't slow down. If it slowed down, you get a low signal-to-noise ratio.
Well, but tape drives do have a low speed, right? That they support?
They have a lower speed.
Yeah, lower speed.
But it's not that low.
It's not like a megabyte a second.
What's that?
It's not like a megabyte a second.
No, like in the case of LTO-10, it's probably 500 megabytes per second.
Okay.
Right? Which is still really fast.
Very fast.
Right?
Yep.
And also when you match that with the type of backups we were doing, most backups are incremental backups, right? Which supply like a megabyte every minute, right? You're scrolling through the file system trying to find files or blocks that need to be backed up. You're not concerned with how many of them, right? So you had this fundamental mismatch between what was happening on the supply side and what was needed on the drive side, right? And when you have that, you end up doing the shoe shining thing where the tape is going back and forth to try to keep up with this slow speed. It literally cannot write slow. So what it's doing is it's like, imagine trying to put people into a car that only knows how to go 60 miles an hour, right? And when it's doing it's going up to 60, and then you're throwing people in the car, and then it's backing up, and it's just crazy what it was doing, right? It was wearing out the tape, it was wearing out the drive, it was making the drive unreliable, and so
everyone complained.
Everyone complained, and we started looking at a way to use disk as a way to ameliorate that issue, right?
Which goes back to your thing about IBM at the start of this.
Yeah, exactly, right. And IBM was the first company with what was originally called ADSM, and then it became called TSM, and now it's called Spectrum Protect, right? This idea of disk staging. So we're going to we're going to do all those incremental backups and put them up to disk, and then we're just going to spool them over onto tape. When they first started doing it, we all thought they were crazy because disk was so expensive. Disk then became less expensive. And then what happened right around 1999, we started partying like it's 1999 because someone invented what?
Deduplicated storage?
Deduplication, yeah. And this idea where we're going to find the duplicate blocks of data between different backup sets, and we're just gonna put pointers. And the pointer thing doesn't really work on tape. I mean, it can technically work, but think about the idea of you having to load 100 tapes to restore one file, and that's why dedupe doesn't really work on tape. So we went from using disk staging, and then more and more people started using deduplicated disk storage, right? Avamar was the first company I remember working with, right? Originally called Undo with 2 O's. Really funny that a company that did dedupe had 2 O's in their company name. I think they got too many Razzers, and so they changed it to Avamar.
But I think, though, one of the keys, right, that dedupe became so popular, like you had mentioned, it's the cost of disk, right? Disk was very expensive. Yeah. And the difference between disk and tape was significant, that people were like, there's no way for backup purposes I can spend millions of dollars on disk.
It was literally like 2 orders of magnitude cheaper, right? And people are like, well, we'll just deal with it. And so what this did was it brought disks down. It's still nowhere near as cheap as tape, but it made it doable, right? Yeah. And, Avamar was the first one I remember working with back in 1999. And then Data Domain was another big one, and they did really well. And I worked with a number of companies along the way that did either target side dedupe the way Data Domain did, or source side dedupe the way Avamar did. Mm-hmm. And it basically made disk feasible. Right, it made it not be crazy expensive. There was another thing that happened, that another technological change that happened right around the same time. Do you remember what that might have been? That helped make disk backup media more affordable.
Oh, this is like the nearline disks.
Yes. So what do you mean?
Oh, this is because previously enterprise disks were all fiber channel, very expensive, and then they started looking at serial ATA disks.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
To lower the cost, because these did not need all the performance of your fiber channel disk. This is just backup media. It's your secondary copy, right? You don't need to put it on very expensive storage.
Yeah. So when you coupled the fact that they were using SATA disks with, less expensive, sort of almost consumer grade disks, with deduplication, you put those two things together, and backup disk suddenly became way more affordable than it used to be. And it came with some really great features. And I'd say one of the best features, a couple of them, right? So, because I'm going to say good things before I say like how bad it was, right? So, one great thing is that it's super easy to do backup verification, right? And and I remember when Veeam came out with their Sure Backup, I think that's the name of it, their Sure Backup feature, where you could create a recovery group, and you could automatically test your backups without actually having to do a restore. You could basically run your VM from your backups.
Yeah.
Right.
And it was and also they had the ability to test your backups. I remember looking at that feature where it was like, hey, we will spin up everything in an isolated environment for you to bring it up, to test everything, to make sure your backups are actually restorable and good to go. And then we'll spin everything down and you can continue on your way.
Yeah. And that is only possible with disk, right? And then another thing that sort of came as and these are all things that modern day users, I think, just sort of assume that they're there, but they're new to those of us that have been around a few years. And that is the idea that I could replicate backups.
Yep.
Right? So we could have on-site backups and off-site backups without handing tapes to a man in a van, because that's the only way we got data off-site. We made a bunch of tapes, we copied them to a bunch of other tapes, and then we put them in a box and we handed it to a man in a van. Now, because we've really reduced not just the total storage that we need to store backups, but the daily amount, like it was less than like 0.5% of the size of the environment each day, then we could replicate those backups. And so we could have an on-site backup and an off-site backup 100% automated, right?
Yep.
Which you may recall in the episode that just aired today as we're recording this, automation, right? You can have 100% automated backup. So backups are so much more reliable than they were back in the day.
Can I add one more?
Yeah, sure.
Also, the notion of virtual synthetics.
Yes. Why don't you talk about what's a virtual synthetic?
Yeah. So like you had alluded to earlier, Curtis, right? With tape, you sort of had fulls and incrementals. And in order to restore your data, you had to always go back to the full and then replay all your incrementals till you got to the point that you needed to get to.
Yeah.
Now with storage, deduplication, you could actually create each copy being a virtual full copy of your data, such that you only need to go to one copy in order to restore the data. You don't have to go and do all the replaying. It significantly cuts down on your recovery time.
Yeah, agreed. And there were two ways to do that, right? You could do it through the software, the backup software, where you basically just sort of create a new full by copying. You've got all the stuff all in one place, and you can just create a new full by copying it. But then there were products like Data Domain that they would just do it with pointers, right? And so you could create a new full that behaved like a full and looked like a full to the backup software, but you didn't actually do any data movement, and that's awesome, right? Now it will be, just as I take a stab at this, it will be the most fragmented full backup you've ever seen in your life, because the bits are all over the place, right? But it will behave like a full, and we don't, again. Backups are so much better than they were when, back in the day, because back in the day, the best design I had back before we went to disk was a monthly full, a weekly cumulative incremental or differential, depending on which product we're talking about, and then a daily incremental. So a typical restore, you would restore the weekly full, you would restore the monthly full, you'd restore the latest weekly differential, and then you'd restore 6 incrementals, right? And if any files changed multiple times, you were actually restoring the same data multiple times. Now we know exactly what the latest version is, and we can just go straight to it.
Yep. So all of this sounds amazing.
It all sounds amazing.
So why are you knocking on disk then?
Yeah, RM-R star. That's why. DEL star. Is there's a recursive option to delete, isn't there? /R or something, or is it /R?
But.
Yeah.
Okay, so I agree.
There's no agreeing or disagreeing. It's a fact.
Let me. It is a fact, but there are techniques with disk storage to help prevent those sort of situations from happening. Such as snapshots.
Yeah.
Such as immutable storage or setting like object lock or whatever the mechanism is that the system supports.
Yeah.
In order to be able to prevent that action.
There are many technologies that we have since invented in order to solve
the problem we created.
To solve the problem we created. I don't know if you've ever heard, in IT, we never solve any problems. We just move them. Yeah. Right. We definitely created new problems. And I think the worst sufferers of this, and again, I don't want to pick on my friends at Veeam, okay, but Veeam customers and products like Veeam, it's not just Veeam, where basically the default setup, you put the backups in like /backups. Yeah. And then a threat actor comes there and says, look at that, /backups, R-R, I guess delete ***/R. I don't know. I should really look that up. Anyway, I know there's a recursive option, right? Or if they have console access, they just right-click on it and delete it, right? And then empty recycle bin.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's the real problem. And I remember, this when I was at Veeam On many years ago. Veeam really acknowledged this, right? It was a difficult session, I think, for them to sort of tell people, hey, this is a threat. And we have this because you remember what was the Veeam?
Veeam storage appliance.
No. What was the Veeam motto?
We make it easy.
It just works, right? It just works,
that was close.
Right? And so they were like, it just works. Having said that, we need to do this thing, right?
But
and they've done a good job at responding to this threat, right? Yeah. But
it takes time.
There was a time there where a lot of people were attacking Windows-based backups, the biggest of which is Veeam. I still think they're probably the biggest Windows backup software in terms of number of installations, for sure. And so we just need to acknowledge. That's my goal of this episode. Is I need you to understand the risk that your backups are under, right? We talk about this in other episodes that backups are the number one target of your threat actor. If they get an initial access, the first thing they're going to do is try to figure out what your backup software is, and they're going to try to take it out, right? And you can address this, but again, the first thing, we have to admit that we're powerless over, step one, right? Admit that we're powerless over threat actors, and appeal to a higher power of immutability.
Of calling it Veeam, call it like Networker or Avamar or something like that.
Oh, like renaming the folders
and your process names.
Rename it like definitely not backups.
Yeah.
like don't look over here. / pork recipes. This is what do we call that? That there are people that do that kind of stuff. Well, I was going to say security by obscurity, but you are correct. Obfuscation is definitely the formal term, and you should do that, right? This is on the list of things that you should do. One of them that you've heard me talk about is, and we're going to talk more about this in other episodes, but is to get the backups out of user space. It should not be in /backups or /backups, whatever OS you're running.
Is the other thing also, don't run your backup software as root?
Well, but you kind of need to, right? It needs to be. By the way, your Linux is showing your Unix. The fact that you're. Well, we're both Linux recovering Linux people. Of course, but do you remember the world before Linux?
No.
Okay, Linux was a thing by the time you were okay. Because I remember the world before Linux. Yeah, I remember the world before Windows too.
I do too.
Yeah, and
I got to play on all the fancy nonstop kernel systems my dad used to work on.
Oh yeah. Your dad's old.
Yes.
Tell him I said hey. Anyway, yeah. So there are a number of things that we can do, and we'll talk about them in other episodes. But just a quick idea is one is to get the backups out of user space. So if you can see your backups as /backups, this is a problem.
Anyone else can see that too.
Yeah, exactly, right. But if you're able to put it on basically truly immutable storage, meaning, again, the standard is if you can't delete the backups, then they can't delete the backups. If you can delete it, then maybe they can, right? Immutability, right? It keeps coming up in, every episode. But it's like if you don't have your backups on a truly immutable storage device, then this is a problem, right? And you're just leaving the... It's sort of like if we're being chased by a bear, I don't have to outrun the bear.
You just have to outrun me.
Yeah, I just have to outrun you. Okay. And what does that have to do with this? You don't necessarily have to beat every, threat actor. You just have to be less appealing than the other person, right?
Yeah.
So there are techniques that we cover. By the way, I haven't mentioned my upcoming book, how to.
The one that's.
Oh, the one that's right there. The Learning Ransomware Responsive Recovery that I wrote with Dr. Mike Saylor, who is a blue team expert, fighting the good fight out there in the trenches every day, and coming to a shelf near you. You can read. You can actually see the early version if you're a O'Reilly Learning Platform person. You can see that right now, and then the regular version will be coming out in March of 2026. So, all right. So that's the thing. Disk is awesome, except when it's not.
Yes.
Just like tape is awesome, except when it's not.
Yeah. You need to understand the limitations of different technologies and use it in the appropriate way, and then make sure you're able to cover the weaknesses.
Man's got to know his limitations.
Oh, Curtis.
Dirty Harry. Love that movie. I can't remember if I shot 5 or 6. Do you feel lucky? Anyway, sorry. If you don't know what I'm talking about, that would be early Clint Eastwood, Dirty Harry. Set where? Come on. All the Dirty Harry movies are set.
I don't know.
San Francisco, dude.
Oh.
Yeah. What the 44 Magnum? This is the 44 Magnum. The most powerful handgun in the world. Blow your head clean off. So the question you got to ask yourself is, do I feel lucky? I actually rewatched that. Not that
That's what I was going to say. You know those lines too well.
Well, I watched that movie many times.
Yeah.
And that's one of the most quotable movie lines, ever.
You know what movie is amazing that you have not seen?
What?
Kung Fu Panda.
I have seen Kung Fu Panda.
But not enough. You can't quote it.
Not enough. Not as many as you. How many times have you think you've seen Kung Fu Panda?
200 something.
Yeah, I don't get it. Anyway, all right, people. Disk-based backups are great, but they do have one major limitation, and we made things better, but then we made things worse. And the threat actors are coming for your backups. You've got to make sure that they can't get to them. All right. Thanks, Prasanna, for the chat.
No. And make sure you pick up Curtis's latest book.
Prasanna's name's in it. That is a wrap. The Backup Wrap-Up is written, recorded, and produced by me, W. Curtis Preston. If you need backup or DR consulting, content generation, or expert witness work, check out backupcentral.com. You can also find links for my O'Reilly books on the same website. Remember, this is an independent podcast, and any opinions that you hear are those of the speaker and not necessarily an employer. Thanks for listening.